What's up, Manna U Majors? I'm Daniel McBride, your Student Life Coordinator, and I'm excited today to kick off our Manna U Moments for this month. This month, we're going to be looking at the book of Joshua and pondering how we can have assurance of what's most important when things are uncertain. To do this, I want to start by examining Joshua chapter 1, starting in verse 1. After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua the son of Nun, Moses' assistant, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore arise, go over this Jordan, you and all this people, into the land that I am giving to them, to the people of Israel. Every place that the sole of your foot will tread upon, I have given you, just as I promised to Moses. From the wilderness and this Lebanon as far as the great river, the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites to the great sea toward the going down of the sun shall be your territory. No man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. Just as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will not leave you or forsake you. Be strong and courageous, for you shall cause this people to inherit the land that I swore to their fathers to give them. Only be strong and very courageous, being careful to do according to all the law that Moses my servant commanded you. Do not turn away from it to the right hand or the left, that you may have good success wherever you go. This book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do according to all that is written in it. For then you will make your way prosperous, and then you will have good success. Have I not commanded you, be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened, and do not be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Now, it's a long passage. There's two big things that happen here. We need to look at the promise, but first, this week, we're just going to look at the command. Go over this Jordan into the land that I am giving to you. Let's talk about that a little bit. That's a tall order. Now, if you backtrack in Numbers chapter 13, when Moses sends 12 spies into Canaan, this land over the Jordan that we're talking about, Joshua and Caleb are two of those spies, and they come back confident that God can give the enemies into their hand. But the other 10 guys who went weren't so sure. They were pretty uncertain, and they spread their uncertainty to the rest of the people. The people got so stirred up and afraid that they said they wouldn't even go into Canaan. And so God says to this entire generation of Israelites, okay. And he let the spies and the entire generation of people that doubted live out their lives in the wilderness. Now Joshua and Caleb are still around, and the children of those people who wouldn't go into Canaan are still around, and Joshua is getting ready to lead the next generation into the land God's promised to them. Now, I want to pause right here, because we can do this thing when we read Bible stories that are just familiar enough where we think about how the story ends instead of what the people in the story would have actually been thinking and feeling. It can cause us to miss important details in passages that we think we know well. For example, when we read these passages about God commanding Joshua to lead the people into the promised land, we can look at that and say, of course you should go. It's easy. God's going to make sure you win. There's nothing to be scared of. But take a moment and consider what the people of Israel would have felt. Unlike you and me, people who have heard this story before and know that they eventually win, they hadn't lived this out yet. They didn't have a book of Joshua to read. They know that God brought them out of Egypt, doing some pretty incredible stuff in the process, and they know he provided for them in Sinai, but they don't know if he'll provide for them in Canaan yet. What if he has no power in Canaan? Remember, ancient Near Eastern religious thought held that gods were geographically locked in their domains, so the god of one land wouldn't necessarily have power in another. How are they to know that God's domain would extend into Canaan? So Joshua may have had a lot of faith, but that doesn't mean that the command from God is easy. Far from it. This is a command to do something challenging and scary, and it will rely on God following through on his promise. But here's the thing. God had a strong track record of providing for the people of Israel by this time. As I mentioned, God has shown his power and love for the people by rescuing them from Egypt and providing for them in Sinai. Now, how does this connect to you and me? God hasn't told me to conquer a foreign land. He hasn't told me to cross a massive river on foot. But you know what? He has told me to do things that I don't want to do. Things that are scary. He's told me to do things like step into roles that'll cause me to grow, that are jobs that are bigger than me, volunteer positions that are bigger than me. He's asked me to lay aside things that may be good, but maybe aren't important for a season. What about when God's told me that I should confess sin to the people I love and respect the most? Has God asked you to do anything like this? See, God tells us to do things like this, and if we aren't careful, we can relax in the wilderness, never achieving what God has for us because we're scared of what's on the other side. And I get why. It's scary when there's something you know God has told you to do and you don't know how it's going to end. Suddenly you get just a little taste of how the Israelites felt when they were commanded to cross the Jordan. They didn't necessarily know how it was going to end. All they had to rely on was God's character that they already knew. Now, if you don't know the rest of the story already, I'll spoil a bit for you. God does help the Israelites cross the Jordan River, and God does deliver the enemies into their hands. He is with them everywhere they go, and He gives them the land on which they tread. They might not have known exactly how everything would go, but we can. See, I might not be able to know how my story ends yet, but I can know how their stories ended. I can also, like them, see how God has come through for me in the past. And while there are a lot of differences between my story and theirs, there is one constant: God. And I can see how God provided for His people in uncertain times before, and how He blessed their steps of faith. So, when things are uncertain, look for what is certain: the character of God.